I still remember the exact moment my phone rang. It was 3:47 p.m. on what should have been the happiest Saturday of my daughter Lisa's life. The summer sun was shining through my study window as I reviewed case files for Monday's hearings. 23 years as a district court judge had trained me to expect the unexpected, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. Before we start the video, please let me know in the comments from which country are you touching. Don't forget to subscribe. Dad. Dad. Lisa's voice cracked through the speaker, thick with tears and panic. They're tearing it down. The reception hall, they're demolishing it right now. Everyone's still inside. My pen dropped from my hand. What? Who's demolishing what? Slow down, honey. The Pine Grove Homeowners Association. They brought bulldozers to the garden pavilion. Mom's trapped in the bathroom and Jenny's hurt her leg. Dad, my wedding dress is torn, and Mark's parents are still inside. I felt my blood run cold. The garden pavilion was the beautiful venue where Lisa's reception was scheduled to begin in less than 3 hours. My mind struggled to make sense of her words. Call 911, I instructed firmly. I'm on my way. I grabbed my car keys, my heart pounding in my chest. As I raced to my car, I called my clerk, Barbara. Barbara, contact Judge Reynolds. Tell him he might need to cover my Monday docket. Family emergency. I didn't wait for her response before hanging up. The drive that normally took 20 minutes I managed in 12. As I neared the garden pavilion, the chaos came into view. A yellow bulldozer had already torn through one side of the elegant white building. People in formal attire stood in clusters on the lawn, some crying, others shouting at men in suits who appeared to be directing the demolition crew. I parked haphazardly and ran toward the scene, scanning faces for my family. Then I spotted Lisa sitting on a bench, her beautiful white gown covered in dust, a tear running from hem to knee. My wife Karen knelt beside her, pressing a cloth to our daughter-in-law Jenny's bleeding forehead. What happened? I demanded, kneeling beside them. Karen looked up, her face pale with shock. They just showed up with papers and equipment. No warning. We were decorating when they started tearing down the east wall. Jenny was hanging lights and fell when the building shook. Lisa grabbed my hand, her fingers ice cold despite the summer heat. Dad, they won't stop. They say we're trespassing. I stood up slowly, rage building inside me as I turned toward the men in suits. I recognized the tallest one immediately, Harold Winters, president of the Pine Grove HOA, known throughout the county for his aggressive enforcement of community guidelines. Excuse me, I said, approaching the group. I'm Richard Martinez. You've just injured my daughter-in-law and ruined my daughter's wedding. I'd like to see your demolition permit. Harold barely glanced at me. This is HOA business, sir. This structure violates our community bylaws. We have authorization to remove it. I asked to see your permit, I repeated, my voice dropping to the tone I used for contempt hearings. A younger man in an expensive suit stepped forward. I'm Jeffrey Benson, legal counsel for Pine Grove HOA. We have all necessary documentation right here. He handed me a folder with several official-looking papers. I flipped through them, immediately spotting multiple problems. The demolition notice was dated for today but hadn't been properly served. The permit itself was incomplete, missing the required safety inspections and environmental clearances. Most critically, there was no court order permitting the demolition of an occupied building. I handed the folder back. This paperwork is insufficient for demolishing an occupied structure. You've endangered lives and damaged property without proper authorization. Harold scoffed. We don't need your opinion. We have board approval. What you need, I said quietly, is to stop this demolition immediately, or I'll have every person operating that equipment arrested for reckless endangerment. Who do you think you are? Harold demanded. I reached for my wallet and removed my judicial ID. Judge Richard Martinez, County District Court. And you've just committed multiple violations that will be heard in my courtroom Monday morning. The color drained from Harold's face. Jeffrey Benson stepped back as if physically struck. Stop the equipment, Harold called out shakily. Stop everything now. The chaos that followed was intense but organized. Ambulances arrived to treat Jenny and 2 elderly guests who had suffered panic attacks. Police officers took statements from witnesses while marking off the damaged section of the building with yellow tape. I found myself sitting with Lisa and Karen on a bench beneath an old oak tree, watching as Lisa's fiancé Mark comforted his parents. I don't understand, Lisa whispered. We had all the permits. The garden pavilion has been here for 15 years. How could they just decide to tear it down on my wedding day? I put my arm around her shoulders. That's what we're going to find out. I made a call to Judge Sandra Patel, who agreed to issue an emergency injunction against any further demolition attempts. Then I contacted Detective James Wilson, an old friend from college who now headed the county's property crimes division. James, I need a favor. I need you to pull all records relating to the Garden Pavilion and the Pine Grove HOA. Something doesn't add up here. While Lisa and Karen salvaged what they could from the venue, moving decorations and gifts to our home, I spoke with Eleanor Richards, the owner of the Garden Pavilion. I've operated this venue for 15 years without a single complaint, Eleanor said, her hands shaking as she showed me her business permits. Last month, Harold Winters approached me about selling the property. When I refused, he started sending violation notices claiming my parking lot didn't meet HOA standards. I addressed every concern, but they kept coming up with new ones. Did he mention why he wanted your property specifically? I asked. Eleanor nodded. His son-in-law is a developer. I heard rumors they want to build luxury condos in this area. The pieces started falling into place. I made more calls, pulling strings I rarely used, asking for records to be sent to my home office immediately. By nightfall, our living room had become command central. Lisa and Mark had decided to postpone their wedding by 1 week. Friends and family had rallied, securing a new venue and notifying guests. But I was focused on a different mission. Karen brought me coffee as I spread documents across our dining table. What are you finding? She asked. Corruption, I answered simply. Harold Winters and 3 other HOA board members formed a shell company 6 months ago. They've been buying properties throughout Pine Grove and flipping them to a developer called Milestone Properties. The same developer that's owned by Harold's son-in-law, Karen guessed. I nodded. They needed Eleanor's property to complete a contiguous block for a high-rise development. When she wouldn't sell, they manufactured violations to force her out. Can they do that? Not legally, I said grimly. And definitely not by demolishing an occupied building without warning. I worked through the night, preparing what would become the most important case of my career. By morning, I had enough evidence to justify an emergency hearing. Monday morning arrived with a sense of grim determination. I'd recused myself from presiding over the case, given my personal involvement, but I'd filed as the primary complainant. Judge Raymond Chin, a respected colleague known for his strict interpretation of property law, would hear our emergency petition. The courtroom was packed. News of the disrupted wedding and dramatic demolition had spread throughout the community. I spotted Harold Winters and Jeffrey Benson sitting with 3 other board members, all looking significantly less confident than they had on Saturday. Judge Chin entered and the bailiff called the court to order. I presented our case first, laying out the evidence methodically. Your Honor, the Pine Grove HOA not only exceeded their authority but deliberately endangered lives during what appears to be part of a coordinated real estate scheme. We have evidence that Mr. Winters and his associates have personal financial interests in forcing Ms. Richards to sell her property. I submitted financial records showing the connection between the board members and Milestone Properties. Then I presented testimony from structural engineers confirming that the partial demolition had been conducted without proper safety protocols, putting everyone inside at serious risk. Jenny, her forehead still bandaged, testified about her fall and injury. Several wedding guests recounted the terror of hearing the building crumble around them. Eleanor Richards presented her complete permit history, proving the HOA's claims of violations were unfounded. When it was their turn, Harold's attorney struggled to mount a defense. Your Honor, the HOA board acted on what they believed were legitimate violations of community guidelines. If there were procedural oversights, they were unintentional. Judge Chin was unmoved. Procedural oversights? You authorized the demolition of an occupied building without proper notice, permits, or a court order. That goes well beyond an oversight, Counselor. By noon, Judge Chin had issued his ruling, an injunction preventing any further action against the Garden Pavilion, freezing the assets of the board members pending a full investigation, and referring the matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. As we left the courtroom, I caught Harold's eye. The man who had so casually dismissed me 2 days ago now couldn't look me in the face. This isn't over, I told Karen as we walked to our car. But it's a good start. The following Saturday dawned clear and beautiful. Lisa's rescheduled wedding would take place at Willow Creek Manor, a stunning historic home that had generously offered their gardens after hearing about our situation. As I helped Lisa out of the car, she squeezed my hand. Dad, I know you've been working around the clock on the HOA case. Thank you for making sure today happened anyway. I straightened the boutonniere on my tuxedo. Nothing was going to stop your wedding, honey. Not bulldozers, not corrupt HOA presidents, nothing. The ceremony was perfect in ways the original plans could never have been. The garden setting provided a natural beauty that no decorated hall could match. Friends had rallied, volunteering their services for photography, music, and floral arrangements. During my father of the bride speech, I looked around at the gathered faces. A week ago we witnessed the worst of human behavior: selfishness, greed, and disregard for others. Today we're celebrating the best: love, community, and resilience. Lisa and Mark, your journey began with an unexpected challenge, but look at how everyone came together for you. That's what family means. That's what community should be. As Lisa and Mark shared their first dance, Karen leaned against my shoulder. You know, if the HOA had just waited one more day, they might never have known you were a judge. I smiled. Sometimes justice requires being in the right place at the right time. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of legal activity. Detective Wilson conducted interviews with all 5 HOA board members. Under pressure, the treasurer, Victoria Mills, agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Harold told us Eleanor's business was operating illegally, Victoria testified. He said the county had already approved the demolition. We just signed the papers he put in front of us. Financial records revealed that Harold had promised each board member a percentage of the profits from the planned development. The paper trail led to offshore accounts, falsified meeting minutes, and a pattern of harassment against numerous property owners who had refused to sell. I met with District Attorney Monica Torres to review the expanding case. We're looking at multiple felony counts, Monica explained. Reckless endangerment, fraud, conspiracy, falsifying documents, and possibly attempted manslaughter given the occupied state of the building. What about civil liability? I asked. Enormous, she confirmed. The HOA's insurance is already preparing to settle with the injured parties, including your daughter-in-law. But the board members themselves? They're personally exposed for any actions taken in bad faith. The case expanded beyond the garden pavilion. Other Pine Grove residents came forward with stories of harassment and excessive fines. Elderly homeowners reported being targeted with violations they couldn't afford to address, forcing them to sell their homes below market value to companies connected to Harold. 3 months after the demolished wedding reception, the day of reckoning arrived. I sat in the gallery of courtroom C as Harold Winters and his co-conspirators faced Judge Chen for sentencing. The investigation had revealed a scheme spanning 5 years and affecting dozens of homeowners. The district attorney had obtained guilty pleas from all parties except Harold, who had insisted on taking his chances at trial. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Judge Chen's voice filled the silent courtroom. Mr. Winters, the court has rarely seen such a blatant abuse of power and trust. As HOA president, you were elected to protect your community, not prey upon it. Your actions endangered lives, damaged property, and betrayed the very neighbors who entrusted you with authority. Harold stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. I sentence you to 8 years in state prison for the multiple felony counts to which you've been convicted. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution to all affected parties, including full repair costs for the garden pavilion and compensation to those who were injured or traumatized by your actions. As the bailiff led Harold away, he finally looked in my direction. I didn't smile or nod. This wasn't personal satisfaction. It was justice for everyone he had wronged. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around the families and homeowners affected by the HOA's schemes. Judge Martinez, one reporter called out, how does it feel to see this case concluded? I considered my words carefully. This case was never about a ruined wedding or a personal vendetta. It was about protecting our communities from those who would abuse positions of trust. Homeowners associations serve an important purpose when run ethically. My hope is that this case prompts reform in how these organizations operate and are overseen. The aftermath brought significant changes to Pine Grove and communities throughout the county. The state legislature passed what became known as the Pavilion Act, requiring greater transparency from HOAs, including recorded meetings, published financial reports, and strict conflict of interest provisions. The garden pavilion was fully restored, with Eleanor Richards overseeing the reconstruction. She added a new wing named the Justice Garden, dedicated to hosting charitable events for families affected by housing discrimination and predatory practices. Lisa and Mark celebrated their first anniversary by renewing their vows at the rebuilt pavilion, surrounded by many of the same guests who had fled the demolition a year earlier. Jenny, fully recovered from her injuries, served as matron of honor. During the celebration, Eleanor clinked her glass for a toast. A year ago we witnessed destruction born from greed. Today we celebrate not just Lisa and Mark's love, but the rebirth of our community. The foundations of this building are stronger now, just like our neighborhood. I watched as former Pine Grove residents mingled with current homeowners and community leaders. The new HOA president, a retired teacher named Gloria Washington, had implemented every recommended reform and added her own touches: quarterly community service projects and a neighborhood mediation program to resolve disputes before they escalated. Karen found me watching the dancers from a quiet corner. "Penny, for your thoughts, Judge?" "I was just thinking about power," I replied. Harold never imagined his actions would be judged by someone who understood exactly what he was doing and had the authority to stop it. "Some might call that coincidence," Karen said. "I call it fate." I smiled. "I call it a reminder that justice isn't just found in courtrooms. Sometimes it's about being present when you're needed most." As the evening wound down, Lisa approached with a small box. "Dad, we wanted you to have this." Inside was a gavel made from wood salvaged from the original pavilion structure. "It's engraved," Mark pointed out. I turned the gavel over to read the inscription: "Justice prevails when good people stand firm." "That's what you taught me," Lisa said, hugging me tight. "When those bulldozers came, you didn't just use your position, you used your knowledge and your courage to protect everyone." Later that night, I placed the gavel on my desk at home, next to family photos and law books that had guided my career. It would serve as a daily reminder that justice isn't abstract. It's as personal and immediate as a father protecting his daughter's wedding day, as crucial as standing between a bulldozer and an innocent gathering. In my 25 years on the bench, I'd heard thousands of cases, but none had taught me more about the real meaning of justice than the day an HOA demolished my daughter's wedding reception, not knowing they would face her father in court. Not just any father, a father who happened to be their judge. The summer breeze carried laughter across my backyard as Lisa's 3-year-old twins chased each other around the oak tree. Karen set out lemonade on the patio table where Eleanor Richards and I were reviewing plans for the 5th Annual Community Justice Fair. "The governor confirmed she'll speak at the opening ceremony," Eleanor said, sliding a paper toward me. "And 3 more counties have adopted the Pavilion Act provisions this year." I nodded with satisfaction. That makes 27 counties statewide. From crisis had come purpose. After retiring from the bench 2 years ago, I'd established the Homeowner Protection Project, a nonprofit providing legal assistance to families facing improper evictions or HOA overreach. What began as a local effort had grown into a statewide movement. The doorbell rang, and Karen returned moments later with Gloria Washington and several Pine Grove residents I recognized from community meetings. "Hope we're not interrupting," Gloria said. "We wanted to share our news in person." She handed me an official-looking document, the deed to a small park being established on what would have been Harold Winter's luxury condominium development. "The community voted unanimously," Gloria explained. "It's going to be called Martinez Park. The plaque will read, 'Where justice stood its ground.'" I was momentarily speechless, watching my grandchildren play in the yard as the future of a community took shape around a table that had once held evidence of corruption. "Thank you," I finally managed. But this was never about one person standing up. It was about an entire community finding its voice. Gloria smiled. "Sometimes communities need someone to speak first, Judge Martinez. You reminded us that one person in the right position at the right moment, with the courage to act, can change everything." As our visitors departed and the sun began to set, I sat alone on the porch swing, reflecting on how a single day, a day that began with a panicked phone call and a demolished wedding venue, had redirected so many lives, including my own. The law books that had guided my career now sat alongside community planning guides and volunteer manuals. The judge's robe hung in retirement, replaced by the more personal mantle of community advocate. My phone buzzed with a message from a former colleague. Another HOA case heading to court, another family facing potential displacement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to ensure that power remained accountable to those it was meant to serve. I closed my eyes, listening to the distant sounds of my family inside the house. Sometimes justice wears a black robe and speaks from behind a bench. But more often, justice is simply people standing firm when others would push them aside, speaking truth when others demand silence, and rebuilding what others would destroy. In the end, Harold Winters hadn't just demolished a wedding venue, he'd awakened a movement. And though he never knew it on that fateful Saturday, the judge whose family he endangered would ensure that justice would not only be served but would continue to protect families long after the gavel fell.